It's a privilege to have Adam Perna on with us this week. So, Adam, welcome to Tales from the Tackle Shop.
Hi, Andy. You right, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. So I really appreciate you giving up your time to do this. It's been a busy time for everybody with everything that's going on, so I really appreciate that. Now, for guys who are listening who may be the maggot drowning fraternity, the matchmen amongst us, might think, not quite sure who Adam is. So I'm just going to tell you, Adam is a specimen angler who has got an envious list of very big fish to his name. And was it last year you brought a book out as well?
It was the end of 2018, so just at the start of 2019.
Yeah, cool. Now we'll get onto the book a bit later, but we're going to get straight into Adam Perna and who he is. So, Adam, we always start with guess. How did you get into fishing?
How did I get into fishing? A lot of people ask me that, and to be honest, it just all started with going fishing with my dad. I remember we basically live on a tributary of the River Ouse. It's a lovely little river. It's not the same as it used to be, but we all used to go down the river after work. My dad and me would go fishing, and I started noticing that he would catch these little tiny roach like this, and little tiny chub and stuff. And I'd start wandering away. As soon as I could use a disgorger, I'd start wandering away, doing my own thing, and I'd catch one that big, and then suddenly I'd catch one that big, and basically it started from there. I just wanted to catch bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'd just wander off by myself, do my own thing, and that's how I got into it. Really, it was really just going along with my dad, and he sort of passed it on to me. He's not a mad keen fisherman. He likes it, but he just really likes getting out and a bit of time on the bank. Whereas I got a bit more focused into I want to catch a big fish. I hadn't seen a chub for months, and then when I caught a chub, I was so excited. It's something new. And then when you catch one that's £2, you get that excitement, and then it's sort of gone from there for me. And then I always wanted that £5 chub, then it's a £6 chub, then it's a £7 chub, and I'm very enthusiastic about it. And that's how I got into it, and it's just grown. I just grew into a specimen angler. As I sort of growing up, a lot of my friends went into carp fishing, and carp fishing just isn't for me. I think you can spend too long carp fishing. Not enough bites, not enough fish, and I like to be sort of a bit more mobile. And I understand the sort of the draw of carp fishing. A big powerful fish pulling the line and pulling the rod and giving you a great fight. I understand that, but I appreciate at the same time. I remember going down with my dad and a roach and a rudd and a small perch and things like that. I learned to appreciate the smaller species as well, so that's sort of where I stuck to start with.
Cool. So
and I moved on to big fish over time.
What sort of age were you when you first started?
I'd say I was 5 or 6.
Yeah, cool.
I'd say I was 5 or 6.
So you started fishing with dad, and then did you? Because most anglers they kind of like a lot of them branch into match angling, or they join clubs. Did you join any angling clubs?
There was a few angling clubs local to me, and it's the same with what I do with my fishing now. I always try and stick as close to home as possible. So if there's a place that's 5 miles away that holds a £4 perch, I'll go there. I won't travel 50 miles unless I have to. I always try and stay with the local clubs and stay as close to home as I can. Especially now I've got a little one, I've got a 6-year-old, and I'm married, and fishing time is curtailed. So, it's different now. But yeah, I always try and stay close to home, basically. But as you were saying about how I got into it as well, I remember when I was little, I caught quite a big perch, and it's sort of, although I started when I was 5 or 6, it didn't necessarily grab me straight away. Although I wanted to try and catch bigger and bigger and bigger fish. I remember there was just this one time where I caught a really big perch. I think it was over £3. It's probably closer to 4 when the river was doing some really big perch, and that was sort of the moment, if you like. I might have been 12 or 13 then, and so up until that point I've been sort of messing around with fishing and just keeping myself busy and getting off down the river, which I enjoyed. But that moment where I actually caught that one big one, and I saw a great big perch in the bottom of the landing net, and that was the sort of moment where it grabbed me. I've written about that, and that's the moment I became hooked, if you like. And from then on, it's been it's never ending now.
That's right. I mean, as a child, when you come across an angler who's caught a big bream, or I remember seeing a guy who had 2 20-pound pike. This is in the 80s, and that vision is still imprinted in my head. How big these fish were, and the colours on a big fish. It just seems the colours are magnified, doesn't it? And the whole experience. I think when you're a youngster and it hits you, it kind of like blows your mind about how magnificent these fish are.
I think you think as a youngster you're never going to catch them. You think you're too small. You wouldn't be able to pull them in. I had a similar experience to what you just said at Claydon Lakes. Me and my dad just went for a walk around Claydon Lakes, the middle lake, which has a lot of big catfish, and it was the middle of the day. And a guy, I think he had a 27-pound catfish, and it's the same thing again. Like that catfish was longer than me at the time, and it's those sort of little moments where you think, oh my god, that's I want to catch one that big one day. I want to catch one bigger than me now. That's the sort of thing. But yeah, to a child's eyes, it's completely different. And that first one, when I got that big perch in the net, that was it. Then that was sort of a game changer.
So that kind of, excuse the pun, hooked you to be a specimen angler.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So you caught that big perch. Was it by chance? Did you just stumble across it and you just were fishing a stretch and you managed to catch one of the bigger perch in it?
Well, I'd been given a John Wilson quiver tip rod for Christmas. So it's my first proper rod. I'd been using 6 and 8 foot rods, and so I was probably 12 or 13 then. And I've been given a proper 12-foot John Wilson quiver tip rod for Christmas. Quite expensive rod. And I thought I'd just go down the river and christen it. And although it was a bit flooded, I went into this old little mill pool, and I'd never quiver tipped before. I'd only really float fished and lure fished, and the quiver tip was sort of nodding away and bouncing away, and it got quite violent. I didn't really know what was going on, so I gave it a couple of turns of the reel, and then suddenly the tip just wrapped around, and I was playing this fish in. It got stuck on a weed raft and everything, typical. I managed to net it in the end, but that was just me messing around. My first time quiver tipping. I didn't really know there was big perch in there like that. There was some huge perch in there at the time. It's just sort of like the right time. But all it was me just having a little go. I didn't really know what I was doing, but managed to sort of fluke it, if you like.
But then obviously the wheels start turning, and then you, as anglers, I think we start the slow journey of realising, hold on a minute, I can only catch what's there. And as a specimen angler, you have to start to balance up which places are worth fishing and which aren't, and then start the journey of trying to get a bigger perch and then exploring of different species. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, now I'll tell you what we're going to do. Let's park that one there, because I'm sure we'll come back to different experiences as we talk. But for guys who are in Fenland, Adam's been doing you live fairly local anyway, but you've been doing an awful lot of rudd fishing, haven't you?
I have. It suits my fishing really, because you can do 4 hours. You go down after work in the summer. You can make it down 5 or 6 o'clock, and you can fish till dark, or even a little bit into dark. So you can do the short session. And obviously, when you've got time on the weekend, or I often try and do a week off around the start of the season, or June, July. So sometimes I'll stay overnight and I'll bivvy up, and I'll just get up and start fishing when it gets light. So I'm ready from the get-go. Other times I'll pop down for 2 or 3 hours. I'll often, even if there's going to be a big thunderstorm and a big blowout, I'll often just go down knowing I've got 2 hours. I think, right, 3 or 4 spots I've highlighted. I'll have a quick go there and then go home. So it's still about an hour away from me, but I'm willing to travel an hour. A 3 pound rudd is something I'm really after. So I'm happy to travel that distance.
The fishing in the fens has changed quite dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years or so. Probably lots of factors, but rudd in particular seems to be. The rudd fishing in the fens seems to be incredible, doesn't it? It seems to have the rudd seem to have really taken over one of the predominant species. So I know you fish a lot of the fen drains. How do you go about sort of narrowing it down? I'm talking to a specimen angler now. You want to catch a 3 pound rudd. Now, anyone listening out there, we're not going to give you X marks the spot, so sorry about that one. But how would you go about sort of your campaign for trying to target a 3 pound Fenland rudd?
Okay, so obviously trying to get inside knowledge is a good thing to do, but I don't try and do that too much. And often people really won't give away what they don't want to give away. They might sort of put you in the wrong direction. So I think you've got to do it yourself. There's a very well-known river in the fens, which everybody seems to start at. Everyone seems to start at one particular point, and then they sort of branch off and go from there. And all these little rivers and drains are all connected, and there's all sorts of little waterways. There's even little ditches that have got big rudd in, and they're all sort of connected. And there's not that many locks on the river, and these fish can travel a long way. So you've got to have a starting point. Find out somewhere that's got big rudd, and then just go from there. Basically, what I did, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago. I started emailing around lots of fishing clubs. I knew where this particular spot was, and I thought, right, I'm not one for doing the norm. I'd like to go away and do my own thing away from the mainly pressured areas. So I started emailing all these little clubs, the 20, £30 a season, and only got a couple of responses. I probably emailed 10 clubs, said, have you got any big rudd? How much does it cost? Would you mind walking down the river with me and showing me if there is anything? And one guy did get back to me, quite comprehensively. And he said there was rudd there, and there's big rudd. And I went down and had a look, and I thought, yeah, this suits me. There wasn't many people around. There was definitely rudd in there, although I didn't know what size they went to. But in my mind, all these little rivers and drains, they've all got 3-pounders. There's not many, but they're all 2-pounders. From every river and drain, you'll catch a 2-pounder. But picking out the better fish over 2.8, 2.10 is quite difficult. But they've all got them, but they're a lot more tricky than you think, really. So, I've sort of moved on. I've gone between a few rivers as well and a few little drains. So I might have a go on a particular drain. I might do a couple of days on there. The next time I'll go back to my main river where I target. So I hopscotch around a little bit.
So that's quite interesting, because that's a completely different approach than I would take, say, for pike fishing, because it's being part of the KGB when you're trying to catch big pike. But that's a different story. So you're actually quite that's quite a nice way of actually collaborating with people, isn't it? Introducing yourself, and you're going about it in a very formal way. And it's quite nice that some angling clubs and some people within the angling clubs will take the time out to respond appropriately. So that's a really nice approach. Now,
I think they're enthusiastic about their club. Like this guy was the chairman of the angling club.
Yeah,
he's enthusiastic about it, and he's sort of proud of it, and he wanted to show me and help me. And I said to him, look, I'm not going to tell loads of people. I only ever fish with one person maximum, and I don't tell everybody where I'm fishing, obviously. I do work hard for my fish. But yeah, this guy, he was great. He walked down the whole stretch with me. He showed me 2 or 3 areas. He'd even been in and thrown some bread in the week before we went for a walk, just to see if anything came up, sort of not waste my time for me going over there to see him. But yeah, a lot of people are really helpful. You've got two sorts of people, haven't you? You've got some people that are really helpful, and some people that won't tell you anything, and there's it's like getting blood out of a stone. So.
Yeah. But that's quite nice, because that's one of the nice. I mean, doing these podcasts the last, crikey, must be nearly 2 years now. It's amazing how many people you meet who are absolutely brilliant, who do loads of things for angling clubs. They're genuinely very nice people, and it's not until you put yourself out that you actually get a response and meet these people. So that's a lovely thing to do. Okay, so imagine you've Adam's done it his way, and he's kind of got an idea of a particular drain or river that he wants to fish for that summer, and also you're going to start narrowing it down to sections. How would you go about actually finding these rudd? Would you visually spot them, or would you fish first of all?
I don't think fish spotting with rudd is the be all and end all. There's a few rivers you can spot them really well, but unless the sun is absolutely perfect and those fish are in the upper layers of water, you're not going to spot them. Like there's areas of rivers, sections of rivers where I've literally written them off and said there's no rudd in there. There's no big rudd, between this point and this point, maybe a mile or 2 miles. And I've gone back on the boat and fished it, and I've caught the big rudd. And it might be a very small feeding period, maybe an hour in the morning or an hour and a half in the evening as the sun starts to go down when they come up. But through the day, you won't see them. And if they're not coming up for that bread, you're not going to spot them. So I think you've got to look for reliable areas with lots of fish, and also the areas that have got lots of little fish. All the little fish and the big fish are mixed in. You won't get vast areas where there's nothing apart from big fish. If there's small fish there, there's big fish there. And they seem to almost just come out of the weed. They just come out of the weed and they come out of nowhere. You'll be fishing for half an hour, you won't see anything, and all of a sudden it's just like they come out of nowhere. They're all hidden amongst the lily pads, the reeds. You've got all that sort of streamery type weed and sort of stuff like that. They're very difficult to spot. I think a lot of the time in the day they're deep and they're amongst the weed, and then they come out every now and again. But feeding bread is a good tactic. Just putting in some mashed bread. Or some floating bread. The floating bread, you just watch it down and see what happens. And often a big fish will come up, boshing, and they'll pick off the odd bit of bread. But also the bigger ones can be very cagey, and they might just take 1 or 2 bits, and then that's it. So you've got to be careful. But for finding the fish, definitely feeding is good. Not necessarily when you're fishing for them. You might want to just cut back on the feed when you're actually fishing for them.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I've done a little bit of rudd fishing now, and I'm finding the fish spotting technique to be fruitless. Really, it's very difficult, but you can find fish, but you can't. In my head, I thought, I might be able to spot some bigger ones, but I'm actually finding, like you just said, just go and give. I just give sections a go, and you actually pick off. If the big fish there, they tend to sort of get quite aggressive with the small ones first, don't they? They sort of plough in and then they go, and then you can kind of work it out from there. That's fantastic. Okay, so you mentioned that you bivvy up as well, so you probably, in my head, I'd imagine that you've worked out which river or drain you want to fish, you've worked out which sections, and then you're going and exploring quite hard, aren't you? You're going to give it evenings, mornings, and you're going to be doing a lot of hard work on I think, have you got an inflatable, or have you got a
Yeah, I've got an inflatable. It's tricky because I haven't got a motor. I just literally row it. So I'll highlight half a mile stretch, and then I'll give it a go on the boat, and it's so much better from the boat. I mean, a lot of these places you can't even get to the river. I know there's some well-beaten tracks in the popular areas, but where I fish, you can't even get to the river unless you have waders on. You know, you're going through nettles that are this high and all sorts of reeds and trees, and it's quite difficult. So the boat is a benefit, but if you can get on somebody's boat, you know, if there's two of you and it's a proper boat, and you can sort of get up and stand and look and, you know, get your arm out, block the sun, that's really good as well. You can actually spot the odd fish doing it like that, but just going up and down the river, sitting down on the boat, again, you're not necessarily going to see them, but it's definitely the best way to fish for them on the boat, I'd say.
I think I totally agree. That's the way I do it. And it's also just a nice, relaxing way. Once you get everything set up and actually onto the water. Okay, so you found your area. You're on your boat and you're working different sections. So, I imagine the water's fairly clear that time of the year in the summer.
Yeah, it is. It's quite clear.
So, what's your go-to methods now? How are you going to target the fish?
So, like I said, if I found a group of fish up and down a stretch, they'll move about a lot. So they might be at the top end one week and, you know, the extreme bottom end the other week, and anywhere in between, really. So yeah, what I do is I'll give it a go. Morning or evening generally is the best time. That's when I'll fish for them. You do get the odd bite when it's absolutely scorching hot and the water's really warmed up and they come up in the water as well. But generally, and a lot of people don't like this, but I'll just trot one piece of bread through the swim by itself. I won't feed anything. So to start with 3 or 4 casts, I'll just put that one piece and I'll trot it down and I'll just see what happens, basically. You get a few small fish coming up and pecking away at it. And then, just like I said, again, out of nowhere, you might just get this big fish come up and whoosh and just grab it. And if you throw 5 or 6 bits of bread in, you'll often get 2 or 3 bits taken. And you think, that's a big fish, that, you know, and you wait for it to come back. It never comes back. So that's why I always start off with just a single bit of bread. That's my go-to tactic to start with.
So
and I'll just anchor up.
Floating crust, or are you letting it sink?
Yeah, floating crust to start with. Yeah, floating crust.
On a little waggler?
I've got some things here to show you. I use a little controller float like this. You can see that.
Yeah, perfect.
It's only 5 grams. It's by Codex. These are the best controllers that I found. This is for floating crust. So I'll fish through the top of the swivel normally for floating crust. But the good thing about this is, if I think, the fish have gone down, you might get a couple of bites, or you might catch one and they spook. Then they go under the surface. So the good thing about this is, rather than just put the bread so it sinks and it's an awkward lie off the top of the swivel, these actually unscrew. So you can adapt it, and you can change it to fishing off the bottom of the float. So they actually screw in at the other end as well. So these are generally the floats that I use, because I can fish off the top of the swivel, floating crust, or I can then switch it so that it sinks naturally through the water and the line lays well. So yeah, that's the little floats I use. Obviously, you've got your regular sort of floats, your regular sort of waggler floats. If I was fishing underneath the water, if I didn't think they were going to come up for floating crust, I'd use one of those generally. But
just show that to the GoPro, buddy, so we can see it. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so that's a normal crystal waggler. Yeah, you've got quite a thick tip on that one, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, this is 5 grams again. This is just because I want to punch it as far as I can.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think, even though you're fishing on the boat and you're quite quiet, you don't catch them 3 yards away from the boat. You generally catch them 15, 20 yards downstream. Yeah. So to be able to just punch it that far to start with is a benefit. And then once you're out there, obviously it can trot down a little bit more. And that's the same reason I use the 5 gram controller. It seems pretty heavy and pretty, overkill. But if you can't get the distance to start with, all those little fish will just come up and muller the bread, and then you won't get any bites. So you want to get a good way away from the boat. I will cast it as far as I can and just leave it. And if nothing comes up for 20 minutes, I'm quite happy, because then often the bigger fish will come up. So that, yeah.
Yeah. What size hooks are you using?
I use a size 8.
I'm glad you said that, because that's what I use.
Is it? All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I tend to use like £6 line and big hooks, because there's lots of lily pads and weeds, and you have to pull fish actually through and out of the weeds, don't you? Yeah,
definitely. It's not just the big fish that you might be playing a big fish. You might plough through some lilies. Lilies are the main problem. You obviously got reeds and some sort of weed underneath the surface as well. But when you strike and you miss a bite, often the float flies past you and you end up in the weeds behind you or in a tree or something. And again, you've got to use quite firm tackle, because you don't want to be losing all your floats and all your hooks and stuff like that. So these are the hooks I use. B983 Camazan. They're slightly finer. They're a slightly finer gauge.
Just show that to the GoPro, buddy, so everyone can see what you got there.
Yeah. GoPro, I have used a size 6 in the past, and I find that the size 6 is just slightly too heavy. So if you've got a small piece of floating crust on a size 6, that will actually start to sink the bread through the water. That's how you've got to kind of balance it, obviously. Yeah. I find the size 8 is just the right size, but also it's the right weight to take a decent piece of crust, doesn't start to sink it. And obviously then if you just want to wrap a bit of bread around it normally and sink it through the surface, you've still got a good size hook, and those hooks generally don't come out. But I wouldn't go, a size 6 just seems a little bit on the big size. A size 8 I think is perfect. Size 10 again, possibly a bit small, and you want to sort of try and put the little fish off. So that sort of medium size 8 hook is perfect for the little ones not being able to nobble it, but still the big ones you're going to hook them well.
And also, a pound rudd's got quite a large mouth, hasn't it, compared to its body size?
They have.
Yeah.
It's surprising what the little fish can get a big bit of bread in their mouth.
Yes, they can, can't they? Yeah.
They're frustrating, actually.
They are, but sometimes they go a bit mad. And they're a bit like, I always think of them like piranhas. And once you get them feeding, they just literally swarm in on bread and all sorts. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, so without giving too much away, Adam, you're on the search of a £3 rudd. What's your biggest so far?
My biggest is 212.
But you've had lots of fish over 2.8, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had quite a few. I mean, like last season was probably my best season for them. But I mean, I'm not setting the world alight. You hear of people catching 8, 9, 10, 2 pounds in a day, and I think a lot of those fish are unweighed. They might be 110s, 112s. Yeah. I won't weigh it unless it's a fairly decent one. 2.25. I probably wouldn't weigh it. But last season I had quite a few at sort of over 2.8. 212 is the biggest, and that beat my previous best, which was 211, and that was from a still water. So I was really happy to catch 212 from a river as well. I think obviously I'm on the hunt for a free. So
yeah, I think we spoke about this 2 weeks ago when we first spoke on the phone. I think just to explain to guys who perhaps haven't done much of this. The rudd are quite weird to estimate their size, aren't they? Because you get a fish that looks massive, and you weigh it, and it's like 2 pounds, and you think, I'm sure that was 3, and then you get another one which was shorter, a bit dumpier, that you think, £1.5 pounds. It's again £2, and it's very difficult. Most fish, other species, you can kind of guesstimate, can't you, quite closely what they're going to be. But rudds sometimes are really weird, how they're hollow or they're full or they're dense. I don't know what it is. I mean, you've got some theories about this. We spoke about this, but they're all different shapes, sizes and weights. It's very strange to work out what's going on.
My friend Barry said the other day, he said perch are called the biggest fish of all, but he thinks rudd are, because when you catch a big rudd, they look so big. I think because I'm slightly, I haven't seen as many as other people. Maybe I'm not as good at estimating them as I'd like to be. But sometimes you catch one and you think, oh my god, that's a whopper, and it really excites you. And it turns out to be a 2.6 or something like that, and you thought that could be pushing £3. But my theories behind it are, I just think sometimes you catch a male and the males look huge. They just seem to have a big frame, but they're quite empty and quite hollow and quite thin across the back. And sometimes when you catch a female and they've got that little pigeon chest, and you can tell that they might have a bit of spawn in them still. They might not have spawned, and they might be coming up to it. And they look a lot smaller, but they can actually weigh a lot more. But it's noticeable that they've got that sort of pigeon chest and a bit of weight to them around the bottom of the belly. Whereas one of the biggest males I caught, I think, was 2'8", and when I caught it, I thought, I'm going to have to call somebody here. I didn't want to take a picture of it by myself, and I thought, this is it, this is the one. And I'd caught a 2'7" the previous week, and this fish looked massive compared to it. But one was a male, one was a female. So, it tricked me into thinking it was a huge fish, 3-pounder, but it was 2'8", so sort of still a good fish, but there's a lot around that size.
It is. Last year, I caught one fish that actually made me come home and get my very accurate digital scale, kitchen scales, and I was comparing my fishing scales I was using at the time with the kitchen scales, because I was convinced the scales had broken.
Yeah.
I'm weighing this fish, I'm thinking, that's way over 3, and it wasn't even close. And I'm thinking, so I got home and I was absolutely convinced, the scales were very accurate.
How big was that one then, Andy?
It was 2'6", I think, but it was
2'6", yeah.
It was so long, and I compared it to a picture of one of a similar weight, which looked tidgy, and I'm thinking, this is playing on my mind. But I had this fish in the water, and it was huge. It looked huge. Its mouth, everything, its proportions were huge. It was so long, and I got home, and for hours I was so confused. But it is what it is, and these rudd are very, very. They're kind of like they suck you in, don't they? Because sometimes you catch them at strange times of the day, and then you get one that you think's not very big, and you weigh it and go, "My God, that's 2 pounds." And then you catch another one, and you think, "No, it's the same weight."
If you haven't seen one for a few weeks, if you haven't seen any big fish, haven't caught a 2-pounder for a while, that's what I was saying about. I'll weigh a 2 1/4 to sort of get my eye in and gauge how big the others are. But yeah, if you haven't seen one for ages, then you catch a big one. They seem so much bigger than the rest that it sort of fools you for a while. But they can be quite difficult to guesstimate. But the 212 I had, again, it looked massive. I got a picture of it next to my hand, and I thought, that's the one. So you weigh it, like you said, you weigh it sort of 3 or 4 times, thinking, maybe the scales are wrong. I'll put the batteries back in again and have another go. And it's always the same. So
I know, it's crazy. Anyway, Adam, so I'm on the search for a 3-pound rudd as well, and I'm like you. The fens seem to be prolific at the minute with rudd, and like you said, there are 2-pound fish in every single system. And I think it's quite nice at this style of fishing, you can actually go miles out of the way and find your own fish, and no one's even trodden the banks, and it's great. So what I'm going to be looking for in the summer is a picture of yourself holding the Fenland holy grail of rudd fishing. So anything over 3 pound, I think, is an absolutely special fish, isn't it?
I hope so. I'll keep trying, and if you get one, generally they're well earned. You don't just land on them and get one sort of in the first couple of weeks of fishing for them. They're generally, you've got to work hard for them. So
yeah, definitely. Right, buddy. You may think I'm pushing you on, but we could talk about fishing all day. And
yeah, I know.
Yeah, the podcast will be 5 hours long, which is great for us, but I think people listening will go, what is Andy rattling on about? So I'm going to move on very quickly, because we could talk about rudd for hours, but we're going to have to park that one there. I'll tell you what we ought to do before we get on to a big chub. Let's have a little talk about this.
Okey-dokes.
So I bought your book, it would have been this time last year. You've got a very good friend, Jamie Martin, who is he running the Grange tackle shop?
Yeah, I think he's the manager of Willow Grange Fishing Tackle Shop near Ely.
Yeah, and he put me onto your book, which is a compilation of some some huge fish that unknown anglers have caught. And I really enjoyed reading this, because I tell you why. The biggest thing that there's 2 reasons. The picture quality in here is fantastic, but it's really nice reading stories from anglers that you know nothing about. Because I think in the angling media, it's the same old faces, and it gets a bit, I don't want to hear about this, that, and the other again. So, have you got your book with you, and you can show the GoPro?
Yeah.
So we hold it up for a bit of time so everyone can have a look at it.
Yeah, there's the book.
So, what made you think about compiling a book?
Well, I just, to start off with, it started very small. I thought to myself, I've had XX and X, to a decent weight, big perch, big roach, and, big whatever, rudd and stuff like that. And I thought, hang on a minute, I'm missing a few fish here. My friends caught a big pike. My other friends caught a big catfish. I know someone's had a near 8-pound chub off the Thames. And I thought, okay, well, if we put all these together, we can make quite a good little local fishing, fishing book, storybook, all about big fish, all from the local area. So I started just to ask people. I thought, we could do a paperback book, something quite, it's quite substantial, but not spending too much money on it, just sort of keeping it local and keeping it small. But over time, I started to ask people. I got a few good stories together. Actually, initially, I wasn't going to be in the book, but I ended up catching a big tench, so I did put myself in the end. But for the first sort of 2 years, I wasn't in the book. I was just putting the stories together. I started realising over time I was missing a few extra stories. People, I don't know everybody, and I didn't know people that caught certain other fish, ferox, trout, eels. And I thought, right, it was looking quite good. The quality was looking quite good. All the stories were coming together. So I thought, I'll branch out and I'll start asking people, about a guy from Scotland for ferox trout and somebody from, a southern gravel pit for something about eels. And it sort of changed from something local and fairly small into something quite big. So, I mean, now we've got a couple of record fish in there. There's the record roach from Ireland. We've got the current record crucian, or I think that's gone now by an ounce. But I started just asking people on Facebook and or ringing people up and chatting to them. And like I said, they're all sort of non-sponsored anglers at the time. I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make somebody a better angler just because they're well known and they've done a lot of writing. And I thought I want to give people a chance to tell their story who might not have been able to tell it before or never been asked to write anything or might not be in the angling papers. But I thought, well, I'll give them a go and see what they can do. And hopefully that made the book quite different, because it wasn't your Drenham Cup winners all the time who are writing about the same things, or you very famous specimen anglers who constantly write in magazines and books and have their own books and stuff like that. So I wanted to sort of keep it fresh and different.
Well, I think it's a really good read. I mean, it's like I said, I've got numerous pike fishing books, and they are. If you looked at the authors, it's the same sort of circuit of authors, and I just thought, so when they bring a new one out, I just think I don't want it because it's going to be another regurgitation of old material. So this was fantastic. Now, I do have to ask you this: with with the internet, books are becoming a bit like dinosaurs, aren't they? So angling publications are a big risk because people tend to want more accessible stuff from the net now, and I think books tend to be, excuse the pun, put on the shelf by people, and they tend not to buy them. I know when I spoke to Dennis Miles when he wrote Fenland Pike with Mark, they managed to get rid of all of their books. But I think since then, a lot of the pike books that have been produced, the authors have been left with them because people don't want them. But I should imagine you must have only a few left. Have you got many left of these? I should imagine they.
I've got a few left. I mean, I've got over 100 left. There's still copies available, but I think with a book, you always want to keep it quite small scale. You don't want to be printing out thousands. Like you said, it's sort of, with the age of the internet and things like that, people are reading stuff online, or things are easily accessible now. You don't want to go mad. You don't want to do 5,000 books. I printed out 500. It was limited to 500, and that's all that there's ever going to be is 500. So the reason I've used extremely big fish from each species. Like I said, I've tried to make it different, but these fish, like the pike on the cover, for example, that fish needs to be written about, and every fish is that sort of caliber. It's a real big specimen. So that's sort of like the selling point from the book. Everyone's done by a different angler as well. So
I think it's just a fantastic idea. So you've got a few left. Let's just let people, because I bet there's some people out there that thought, oh, I'd love a copy. I mean, I got mine from Jamie from Willow Grange Tackle Shop. Does he have any left? Has he got a few left?
Jamie's got. Jamie, he had 10 to start with. I think he's got 5 left now.
Okay.
But obviously, if he runs out, I'll just give him a few more. But
can people get them directly? Can they get them directly from you?
Get them from me if they want. They can just go. There's a Facebook page set up. Anyone can message me on Facebook and ask about it if they want more details or want to see some pictures. And then I'll send them the information. So there's an actual Facebook page set up. or anyone can just give me a ring or just email me really. But yeah, Jamie's got a few, and there's a few other tackle shops which have got some. But the closest one to you in the Fens is Jamie.
Yeah, and if listeners would like to know any more information about the book, can get in touch with me, and I'll put them in touch with you, Adam. So we'll do it that way. Perfect. Because I think it's great that you've 500 is nice because it makes it very collectible then as well. Have you got any? Did you do any leather bound ones and just have kept them back?
I didn't do any leather bound ones, to be honest, because I didn't realise. Leather bounds are very expensive to do, and unless you can sort of get them pre-booked, pre-bought if you like, there's no point in doing them. I think it's too risky. Again, you don't know how many people are going to want to take them, so I've just kept them. They're all hardback. There's no there's no softback. They're all hardback books. Yeah. But yeah, limited to 500.
I think it's a great idea because, like I said, I know one or two people have gone down this route, and it's a bit of a gamble, isn't it? Because you've got to think, are people going to buy them? But I can really recommend this book. It's one of the best fishing books I've ever read because, like I said, it's nice, and you can tell different people have written different sections because it's actually got a different slant on each different section. So I think it's
it's not instructional like you're reading a magazine. Some people have gone more into in depth about rigs and stuff like that, but most of it's sort of story based, and it sort of flows, and it's got an atmosphere around it, which is the way I wanted people to write it. I didn't tell people how to write it. I just said write it in your own style, do it how you want. I didn't give them guidelines because, again, it might just all follow the same path, and it might read like a magazine then. But what I wanted to get over is their excitement and the joy of catching that big fish. The sort of the lead up to it. There's quite a few good trophy shots of backup fish. They do go into rigs and venues and stuff like that, but generally it's that moment of catching that big fish and how happy it made them feel, really.
Oh, lovely. I mean, that's the essence of specimen hunting, isn't it? And I think, like I said, it's just a really great way of putting a book together. Okay, now, we were going to talk about perch, but maybe in the future we'll come back and just do a perch-only vodcast because, like I said, we could really get into each species deserves its own section because we could talk for hours on perch again. But we're gonna leave perch there. Maybe next year we'll come back and do one on perch if you're up for it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
Now, I know another species that you wanted to talk today was the chub, because you've had one or two clonkers there as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I love chub fishing. It's quite addictive, and again, in the winter when the weather's cold, and it sort of suits me because you can go and do a 3 or 4 hour session after work. Even if it's dark, you can just go out for 3 or 4 hours. You don't need to fish in the daylight, and it's just that sort of that quick fix, if you like, that you can get. Whereas in the winter, most of the time, a lot of the rivers are flooded, or it's it's very cold. It's quite difficult to get a bite, and chub can be quite obliging. So,
well, you've taken the words out of my mouth. I was about to say chub are very obliging in the winter, aren't they? They tend to have a go if you get the bait presented in the correct manner. Okay, so I'm going to pick your brains again. Obviously, when you were a young lad, that's how you started off fishing. Fishing probably, by the sounds of things, chub rivers. So you're obviously very used to catching them. So if you're after a particular size of chub in the winter, so what would be your target weight, say, for example, this year?
I'm always after a 7-pounder, to be honest.
Right.
Although I've had sevens in the past, it's always the benchmark, really. You want to try and pick up some 5s and 6s and see how you go, but obviously £7 is
just pick them up as you're going along.
Yeah, that's what you want to be catching. Yeah, as long as you're catching fish when you're chub fishing, you're happy. The size doesn't matter that much, but at the end of the day, you want to be fishing somewhere where there is a 7-pounder. So if you don't think there's any 7s there, this is my point of view. I wouldn't fish somewhere if I didn't think there was a 7-pounder. Because obviously I've had 7s. I've had my biggest chub was 7.9 off the Lee.
Wow, yeah.
Which is a big fish. So if I didn't think I could beat that, then the way I am, I think, well, I haven't got that much time, so I don't want to put loads of effort into a river, and the biggest fish I'm going to catch is £6. So yeah, that's sort of my mindset. But I'd always, look for the big fish and the big fish stretches. That's where I'd target. Even if bites are few and far between, you're better off having less bites and getting a better stamp of fish.
Right. So obviously, trying to pick your brains again. We're not going to mention any venues, but so you're on the hunt of a 7-pound chub. Are you going to be looking at I was going to say the local rags, but we only have one now because the Angler's Mail has gone. So,
yeah.
Is it like looking at internet, looking at angling times, or is it like your Rudd approach where you get in touch with people? How would you go about it, basically, without giving us too much secret stuff?
I think the Chub rivers are fairly well known. I think you've just got to pick a river with a good calibre. I don't think you need to necessarily pinpoint a stretch or anything like that. You sort of, as you fish, you'll find out, pick up information, you'll find out where the fish are. But as long as you're on a good river, the Thames is always a good one. There's big fish on the Ouse, although it's a lot harder than it used to be, and the Lee. So I've had a 7 off all of those rivers because they've got the big fish calibre. There's loads of rivers with £7 chub, but again, fishing for specimens is always going to be difficult. So just make sure you're in the right area on the right stretch that's got 7s or what you're after. Your biggest chub might be £5. If you're after a £5, make sure there's £5 there.
Yeah. That's the secret of specimen fishing. I learned that the hard way with pike fishing. For years, I was trying to catch a Fen 30 from drains where there wasn't anything like it near it. And you sit there, and it's only after a while you go, oh, come on, what have you been doing? And you have to reboot, don't you, and go, you can't keep doing this, 'cause it's just not going to happen. You can't catch what's not there.
They might have done, that Fen drain might have done one day, in the past, but they're not there all the time, and the fish obviously move around, and they just sort of die off, and it might take a few years for them to come back. So exactly. Pinpointing where the fish are is difficult. It's sort of like the hardest part, really. Without just fishing absolute obvious places where they get hammered, or there's places like, let's say, the Dorset Stour and Throop and places like that. They're so well known. It does hold the big fish, but obviously it's going to be harder because a lot of people fish it. So you've got to balance it between fishing somewhere that doesn't get too heavily fished, that gives you a better chance of getting the bites, and fishing somewhere that's got the size of the fish you want. So it's sort of like a balancing act. But
I got you.
Yeah.
So imagine you've picked your stretch, which is probably a nice little stretch run by a fairly private club that isn't hammered too much, and perhaps has got a bit of a mystique about it as well. You're pretty sure that you're on the right area, but hopefully it's got something a bit special in it. So how would you approach it on the day if you're chub fishing? So imagine it's got a nice flow on it. It's perhaps finding down, not this winter because everywhere seems to be in flood constantly, but finding down after a bit of a flood. What's your mindset? How would you go about finding the fish?
I'd fish each good looking swim for a short amount of time. Half an hour, 45 minutes is long enough. And in the winter, you want to be moving around and searching for the fish. And to start with, the first 3 or 4 sessions, I would sort of hop around, fish up to maybe 8 or 9 swims in a day. And to start off with, you can fish with bread. There's plenty of ways to catch big chub. You've got bread, you've got maggots, you've got lamprey. I'd sort of try and pick out the bigger fish, use big baits, cheese paste, big bits of bread, stuff like that. Chub can be quite easy to find in the winter because a lot of the rivers they're so fast that the fish won't comfortably sit in that fast water in the river. They'll be looking to get out of the flow into sort of slacks or somewhere that's a bit slower or a bit of cover. You might walk down a stretch. There might only be 3 or 4 places that you think, well, the fish will be happy to sit there. So those are the sort of places you've got to try. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to catch them either. They don't always play ball. So I'd rotate those swims. You think, the fish are going to be comfortable there. There's definitely going to be something there. Even if you catch a chub and it's £2, that's a good omen because the fish will be happy holding in that sort of water.
How are you going to work out what hook baits you're going to use on the day? Does it depend on time of year and the water conditions? Do you have a certain favourite baits for certain times of the year?
I think there's not many chub baits I actually use. There's plenty of things you can catch them on. You can catch them on anything. But to pick out the bigger fish, I'd say in the day you want to be sticking to cheese paste and bread because trotting maggots and using worms, they can get ripped off the hook. The worms can get ripped off, and the maggots you might pick up small roach and dace and stuff like that all day. So, and you can feed a chub swim for an hour with maggots before you actually catch. You might have to put a lot of feed in to actually bring them on. So you don't have that sort of time. So I'd stick to sort of big bits of bread, liquidized bread maybe in the feeder, cheese paste, stuff like that, stuff you're not going to get pestered by small fish with. And then moving on into the darkness, I generally fish with boilies and paste at night because I like to try and pick out the bigger fish. Yeah. And again, occasionally I'll use lamprey. I use a braided hook link and I'll use chunks of lamprey on a big hook. And again, when that goes around, generally it's not a small fish. You often get, you can use great big lumps, bigger than a golf ball, and the chub will hammer that. So that's a really good bait. That's a bit of a change bait. But after dark, I use boilies. I'm not as happy using the boilies in the day because the rigs can be quite crude. And I think if the water's clear, they can sort of pick out, they can see the heavy lead and the end tackle. So that's sort of more of an after dark method for me, the boilies. You catch the odd fish on boilies in the day, but generally I'd go a bit finer, cheese, paste and bread.
So I think the way you've explained it to me is once you get to dark, you're using a smelly bait approach to try.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you're relying on their sense of smell to attract the fish to the bait.
Yeah, and obviously it doesn't matter what the rigs are like at night because they can't see it. As long as your hook bait is good, you're just looking for that pickup. You can use a fixed rig or a running rig, but you're looking for that big fish to pick up that big bait.
Yeah. Have you got any rigs there for us, or have you?
Yes, I have. I've got some boilie rigs actually for my after dark stuff. I'll just get these. Again, a lot of people don't like the sort of boilie approach because it's not necessarily traditional. But what you want to do is just catch fish. I just want to catch fish. I'm not bothered about how I do it. I want to use the most effective method of catching fish. So for me, after dark, boilie fishing is probably the best. Again, cheese paste is good at night as well. Again, it's very smelly, so that's something you can use. Cheese paste is good. But I prefer to go for the boilies. It doesn't come off. They don't come off the hook. You've always got a bait on. If you get 5 or 6 wraps with a bit of cheese paste, soft cheese paste, or a worm or a lamprey, sometimes that bait's gone, and you might fish there for half an hour, reel your rig, and you've got nothing left. So with the boilies, they're always there. So I've got a rig here. So what I use is a combi rig for the boilie fishing. So you've got a very taut piece of line going down to a short braided section. And again, I think that's a size 8 hook with a fairly short hair on it. Now, I've got one with a boilie on here as well. And what I use is an extender stop, because chub like the boilies to be very tight to the hook because they're quite finicky the way they pick it up. They don't sort of pick it up like a barbel and hook themselves easy. So what I use is a 1/4 extender stop. I'll show that to the camera. And you can just sort of tease that extender stop in without putting tension on the hair, and you can keep the hair extremely tight to the shank of the hook. Now, if you were using it for barbel, I can just pull that and it comes away. Section there.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so basically it's a little quick fix, and you can have the hair set, and by using this you can change the boilie size or put the boilie extremely close to the shank of the hook and put a small bit of paste around the boilie. If you want to put a bigger bit of paste around the boilie, or you want to switch to fishing for barbel, you'd pull the extender stop out, have a longer hair, and then that's the way to go. So the reason I use this sort of rig is I attach a little PVA bag to the hook, and when you cast into the water, because the river's flowing quite hard in the winter, this rig will always sit well because you've got a taut piece of line there that can't get tangled. The only bit that can get tangled is the little braided section at the end. Yeah. Basically, what happens when you cast into the water is the PVA bag gets taken down the river by the flow, and everything just straightens out.
Yeah, I got you.
And that is attached to a little lead clip system.
Yep.
And the size 8 swivel pushes in there, so it's a semi-fixed rig. If the fish pulls hard, it will pull the swivel out, so it can't get snagged up. It won't get into any difficulties. But as soon as that fish picks up that boilie, because it's all tight and straight, the flow is straightened out the rig. Then it picks it up and it feels the weight, and hopefully it hooks itself.
I bet you get some screaming takes on that rig.
You do. You get sort of a couple of different types of bites. You either get a fish which just picks it up and knows it's hooked and just pulls the rod almost off the rest, wrenches it round, especially with the flow. Or you get these sort of like violent bangs on the rod tip, and they've obviously picked it up and it's pricked them, and then they're sort of in the flow and they're pulling backwards and forwards and they're thinking, hang on, what's going on here? Or they might even carry on feeding because they don't know the hook's in there. Occasionally you get these sort of bang, 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 and then you just pick up and the fish is on, doesn't know it's hooked. Other times it will just rip the rod off the rest. So
that's cool. Just going back to your rig, Adam, so for the stiff section, is it fluorocarbon or mono?
Yes, it's fluorocarbon. It's heavy as well. Like I say, fishing after dark, they don't know what strength line you're using. I think that's something like 18-pound line.
Yeah.
I do occasionally use these rigs for barbel as well on the Thames, so I do a rig that I can use for both. Yeah. But yeah, in the daytime, I think you've got to be a lot more cute, you've got to use a lot more finesse. At night, it doesn't really matter what you use. Whatever I land, if it's a barbel, a river carp, or a chub, whatever I fish for and hook, I want to be able to get it in. I don't want to worry about snags or anything like that. So I'm using fairly heavy gear, a 1.75 test curve rod. It's all geared towards big fish and making sure I land them. In the daytime, I'll use quiver tips and fine rods, 1 pound rods for trotting and, a dainty little quiver tip just tucked under a tree with sort of 6 pound line and small hooks and stuff like that. But at night time, you can just go big.
Yeah. You've explained it beautifully why. So going back to the fluorocarbon, so the fluorocarbon's really good for the abrasion resistance as well compared to braid, isn't it? And what knot are you tying the link to the braid to the fluorocarbon with?
I've got a little small swivel here.
Oh, you've got a swivel. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Yes, I've got a small swivel on there, and it's got a bigger circular bit at the end, so it's sort of free to rotate. So you've got...
Is that looped? Have you looped it to the fluorocarbon, or have you tied it?
Yes, I've got a loop. And the reason I've looped it on is just because if the hook gets blunt, I can change it.
Yeah.
I can unloop it or cut it off and just loop another one on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've basically got a hinge there.
Yeah.
So you've got the taut section which won't move, and you've got the small sort of 4-inch, 5-inch section that can move.
And you've got a bit of putty or a bit of putty on the braid?
Yeah, I've got a bit of putty on there. The crayfish seem to like the putty. You can put a rig out with just some putty on and you catch a crayfish. They're weird. Occasionally you bring it in and it's all been nibbled off. They do like the crayfish, but yeah, it's got that hinge point. Obviously, it's a combi rig.
Yeah.
That's why it's called a combi rig.
Yeah.
So you've got this sort of supple section at the end, but like I say, that's all been straightened out by the PVA bag, so it should be taut, but it just gives you a little bit of movement, and the fluorocarbon keeps that bit stiff and away from the lead.
So you've got the putty on the end because you've got a buoyant buoy on, have you? So it's just a pop-up.
I use wafters. I do use bottom baits as well. I mean, it doesn't really matter because you've wrapped it in paste. It will sink to the bottom.
Yeah.
So what I do use is a hardened bait. These are called hard hookers. They're hardened because the crayfish, all the rivers I fish, the Thames, the Lee, the Ouse, the Chub, you will get crayfish problems. And again, you don't want to be thinking, have they, nibbled all that boilie away? So yeah, I'll even dry these out for a few days so they're extra hard.
Yeah. And
the main attractant is the paste. The paste around the boilie is what's bringing them in, and obviously that breaks down and leaves a bit of a scent trail in the water. But the actual boilie, once the paste is gone, you want to be bringing it in and putting another bit of paste on. So that's what I said, half an hour, 45 minutes, especially with a bit of flow, that might be a bit quicker. So the actual boilie isn't that important. As long as it's hooked up nicely and you can, the hair's the right length and it's sort of just away from the hook, quite tight to the shank, but just away. The paste is actually what gets you the bites.
Perfect. So that bit of putty is basically just to nail the hook link to the bottom in the flow, isn't it?
It's just to keep it all tight. Yeah. I mean that's sort of like a couple of centimetres away from the hook, but again, it's just keeping it all taut and sort of separated, really.
Cool. What size hook are you using there? Is it 6?
I think that's a size 8 again, and I think this is just a 15mm boilie here. Yeah. So 15mm to a size 8 is about right. You could go a bit bigger. If I was using a big bit of paste, I'd probably up the hook size. So I've got all these rigs set out already. I've got ones with 6s, ones with 7s, ones with 8s, ones with 10s for whatever type of boilie I'm going to be using or whatever's on the hook, really. Perfect. So if I wanted to use them for barbel, I'd probably be using a 20mm boilie with a great big bit of paste on it, and I'd probably use a size 4. Yeah. But I might, again, with the barbel, I might just switch to just a braided hook length. There's not the more knots you've got with barbel, the more problems you can have because they're so strong. You're better off just using a heavy bit of braid, 20-pound braid or something like that, straight up to the swivel. Don't mess around with all these knots and stuff. If you're thinking you might land a 15-pound barbel, they'll find a weakness in any little knot. So keep it simple.
I haven't caught huge barbel. I've had them up to 8.5, I think. I haven't done much barbel fishing, but I would truly recommend anybody, if they want a hard-fighting fish, try and catch a barbel from a fast-flowing river. It is something else, isn't it?
Oh, barbel fishing is brilliant, yeah, barbel. I mean, you don't get that many big barbel. You don't catch hundreds of them. So when you get one, it's exciting. It's great. But yeah, you don't get that many opportunities. So if you catch one, you're lucky, really. Yeah. They're awesome fish.
Cool. I'll tell you what we're going to do, Adam. Because when we spoke on the phone, I was trying to explain to you how the time flows. It just goes, and we've nearly done an hour. which is incredible. I know we've just basically very lightly touched on rudd fishing and chub fishing,
I know,
which is incredible. Now, I'll tell you what we'll do. If we're going to we'll end the podcast here, and then what I'll do, we'll give guys instructions how to get in touch with us about the book and so forth. But it'd be great in the future if you're up for throughout next year, just doing little sections. Maybe we'll do a little chub section, little perch section, and if people have got questions for us, I could direct them to you, and we could perhaps do little sections on certain species, because like I said, we could talk for hours and hours and hours, and it's fascinating stuff. Yeah. Okay, so for listeners out there, thanks for tuning in today. This has been Adam Perna on Tales from the Tackle Shop. Don't forget his book. We're not trying to plug it here. It is a really good read, and that's one of the reasons why I got in touch with him, because I thought to him, this is a fantastic book. It'd be nice to just sort of air it on the podcast, really. Adam, stay on the line, but thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
So if guys want to get in touch with you, the best way is how?
The best way is probably Facebook. Looking up the Facebook page for the book. My number's on there. I've always got my number online. I know it's a bit risky, but my number and my email's on there. So if anybody ever wants to call me, text me, or just get in contact via a private message, then any way really.
Well, I'm just going to reiterate what you just said, because we don't really know each other. We've spoken a couple of times on the phone, and I tell you what, one of the first things Adam said to me is he just wants to help people in their fishing. And the last couple of years, as I've been branching out from the KGB pike fishing world, I've met some lovely people, and that kind of resonated in my head. You just genuinely want to help people out and help them catch more fish, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't get jealous of people catching fish. I'm not envious like that. You know, I want everybody to catch fish. I think there's enough fish out there for everybody to catch these big fish. And if I can help anybody in any way, I will. You know, I'll give them information or any little bits of, little tips and stuff like that. I want to catch a 3 pound rudd, but I want you to catch a 3 pound rudd, and I want the next person to catch a 3 pound rudd, because I want everyone to share that experience. And I wouldn't want to keep that to myself. I'm not jealous of people catching fish. I just want everybody to catch big fish. So that's my outlook on it.
Well, that's to your credit, buddy. Right, stay on the line. I'm just going to stop this, and I'm going to say this has been Tales from the Tackle Shop, a Fenland Fishing TV production.